The concept of U.S. strategy, Cold War to post-GWOT, refers to the evolution of American foreign and military policy from the era of Cold War tensions through the more recent challenges posed by the global war on terrorism, GWOT. During the Cold War, U.S. strategy was primarily focused on containing the spread of communism, with a significant emphasis on nuclear deterrence, and the development of strategic alliances, such as NATO, to counter Soviet influence. This period was marked by geopolitical maneuvering, proxy wars, and a persistent threat of nuclear conflict. The significance of analyzing U.S. strategy from the Cold War to the post-GWOT era lies in understanding how America's priorities and tactics have shifted in response to global changes. Post 9/11, the U.S. pivoted to combating terrorism, leading to prolonged military engagements in Afghanistan and Iraq. These strategies highlight the U.S.'s ability to adapt its approach based on evolving threats, illustrating a shift from state-centric conflicts to combating decentralized terrorist networks. A real-world application of this shift can be seen in the U.S.'s initial Cold War policies, such as the Marshall Plan, which was aimed at rebuilding Europe economically to prevent the spread of communism. Similarly, post-9/11 efforts, including the invasion of Afghanistan, were intended to dismantle terrorist networks and establish democratic governance, although with varying degrees of success. Supporters argue that these strategies have been crucial for, originating with George F. Kennan's Long Telegram and later articulated in 1947 by Kennan's X article in Foreign Affairs, containment, became the cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy throughout the Cold War. This strategy involved a range of military, economic, and diplomatic efforts, designed to curb Soviet expansion and promote Western democratic values. The significance of this containment strategy is profound, as it shaped global geopolitics and influenced U.S. foreign policy decisions for more than 4 decades. It marked the U.S. commitment to a bipolar world order dominated by the ideological confrontation between capitalism and communism. Containment guided numerous policies and interventions, from the Truman Doctrine's support of Greece and Turkey to resist communism in 1947 to the Marshall Plan that aimed at rebuilding and politically stabilizing Western Europe. 2 specific examples illustrate containment in action. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, saw the U.S. leading United Nations forces to repel North Korean aggression and prevent the spread of communism in the Korean Peninsula. Another example is the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which, while primarily a direct confrontation, was underpinned by the larger strategy of containment, as the U.S. sought to prevent the Soviet Union from establishing a nuclear presence in the Western Hemisphere. Opinions in support of the containment strategy emphasize its role in successfully preventing Soviet dominance in Europe and elsewhere without direct military conflict with the USSR. Proponents argue that containment led to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union by economically and politically isolating it. However, the strategy also faced challenges and controversies. Critics argue that containment led to unnecessary military engagements, such as the Vietnam War, which resulted in significant loss of life and resources without clear success. Some contend that the strategy exacerbated tensions and prolonged the Cold War. The evolution of U.S. containment strategy during the Cold War is intricately linked to subsequent American foreign policy, such as the pivot to counter-terrorism post 9/11. While the context and adversaries changed, the foundational logic of protecting U.S. interests and promoting democracy continued to influence strategic decisions. Understanding this evolution provides invaluable insights into the complexity and continuity of U.S. strategic thinking from the Cold War to the post-global war on terrorism era. Détente was a significant strategic shift in U.S.-Soviet relations during the Cold War, characterized by a relaxation of tensions and an emphasis on diplomatic engagement, arms control, and increased communication between the two superpowers. This approach marked a departure from the previous strategy of intense rivalry and confrontation that dominated the early Cold War years. Détente emerged in the late 1960s and continued into the 1970s, aiming to reduce the risk of nuclear conflict. Promote stability and pave the way for cooperative solutions to global issues. The significance of détente in the broader context of U.S. strategy from the Cold War to the post-global war on terrorism lies in its demonstration of how diplomacy can recalibrate global power dynamics and mitigate existential threats. It also foreshadowed future diplomatic efforts, proving that even amidst deep-seated ideological differences, dialogue and negotiation could produce tangible benefits. Specifically, the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, resulting in treaties such as SALT I in 1972, exemplify the practical outcomes of détente. These agreements aim to halt the arms race by limiting the deployment of nuclear weapons, serving as critical steps towards nuclear non-proliferation. Another example is the Helsinki Accords of 1975, which were pivotal in promoting human rights and easing tensions between Eastern and Western Europe by encouraging cooperation in various fields. There are supportive opinions that argue détente contributed to a decrease in military confrontations and fostered peaceful coexistence, a significant achievement during a period marked by the perpetual threat of nuclear war. However, the policy faced challenges and criticisms. Some viewed détente as appeasement, arguing it allowed the Soviet Union to expand its influence unchecked. Others contended that it failed to address core ideological conflicts and human rights abuses within the Soviet bloc, hence not fundamentally altering the competitive nature of U.S.-Soviet relations. Critics also pointed to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 as evidence that détente's influence was limited and ultimately reversible. Détente's principles of negotiation and cooperation have continued to influence U.S. strategic thinking beyond the Cold War, notably in diplomatic approaches to complex international issues during the post-global war on terrorism era. It underscores the ongoing relevance of balancing military strength with diplomatic engagement to manage global conflicts and foster long-term security. The period of détente serves as a reminder that even ostensibly entrenched adversaries can find common ground through persistent diplomatic efforts. Reagan's defense buildup marks a pivotal moment in the trajectory of U.S. strategy from the Cold War to the post-global war on terrorism era. During the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan initiated a substantial increase in defense spending aimed at modernizing the U.S. military and exerting pressure on the Soviet Union. This strategy was grounded in the belief that a robust military stance would deter Soviet aggression and ultimately lead to the end of the Cold War. The significance of this buildup lies in its contribution to shifting the balance of power and accelerating the collapse of the Soviet Union, thereby reshaping global geopolitical dynamics. One of the most prominent examples of Reagan's defense initiatives is the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, popularly known as Star Wars. This ambitious project aimed to develop a missile defense system capable of protecting the U.S. from nuclear attack, fundamentally altering the concept of deterrence. Another example is the substantial investment in new technologies and weaponry, such as the B-1 bomber and MX missile, which not only enhanced U.S. military capabilities, but also sent a strong signal to the Soviet leadership about America's determination to win the arms race. Supporters of Reagan's defense buildup argue that it was instrumental in bringing the Cold War to a peaceful conclusion. By ramping up military spending, the U.S. increased the economic pressures on the Soviet Union, which struggled to keep up with the arms race due to its already strained economy. This perspective suggests that Reagan's strategy forced the Soviets to negotiate and ultimately led to significant arms reduction agreements, such as the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty of 1987. However, this approach was not without controversy. Critics argued that the defense buildup escalated tensions and the risk of nuclear confrontation. They contended that the immense costs associated with increased military spending contributed to national deficits and diverted resources from domestic needs. Furthermore, some believed that internal Soviet factors like economic stagnation and reformist leadership under Mikhail Gorbachev played a more critical role in ending the Cold War than external military pressure. Reagan's defense buildup connects to broader themes in U.S. strategy by highlighting the role of military power in achieving geopolitical objectives. It reflects a continued reliance on military strength that persisted into the post-global war on terrorism era, influencing U.S. foreign policy and defense strategies. The lessons learned from this period continue to inform contemporary debates over military spending and diplomacy, illustrating the enduring complexities of balancing hard power with other strategic elements in international relations.